Right, and of course that really acts as a segue to a discussion here with our panelists this morning. We're looking at the standard gauge railway, the good, the bad and the ugly. And I'm joined this morning by the Managing Director of Kenya Railways, that is Mr. Atanas Maina. We do have with us as well Patrick Obath, who's the Chairman of International Chamber of Commerce Kenya. Also, we're joined by Kevit Desai, who's the Coordinator of Private Sector SGR Consortium. Also, we do have Dr. Collins Odote, who is a Senior Lecturer, University of Nairobi, also a columnist with the Business Daily as well. Right, let's just get down to the brass tacks right now, and we begin with you, Mr. Maina. First of all, the beauty of the Kenya, of course, the SGR, so to speak, is that you've completed the first phase. Now we are eagerly waiting to see the second phase. But can we talk about the challenges? Can we talk about, of course, some of the experiences that you had launching out the first phase of it?
Thank you very much, Debarl, for that question, and thank you for having us this morning. I think the best place to start would be to say that on a day like today, 4 years ago, the discussion that would have been having, or the discussion that was going on in this country,
yes,
was about whether or not this project should be undertaken or not.
Yes.
And at the time, I recall we were busy trying to explain or being accountable to the people of Kenya. A lot of work was done through various parliamentary committees to take them through how the project had been conceived, and eventually we got their clearance that we needed to move on. So we started off the project implementation by end of December 2014, precisely 12th of December 2014, and we are happy to say that 3.5 years later, by 30th of May 2017, the project was delivered. Yes, challenges were many, not unexpected, from reclamation of land from sea, about 140 acres where we have our Portris terminus. We had a lot of challenges in terms of obtaining material. Were we going to use sand? Eventually we had to use rock because there were so many suits stood on our way to be able to harvest sand. That we were able to overcome. Challenges touching on land acquisition. The whole issue of explaining to the people what this project was all about, resistance. But we were able to have a lot of sensitization work that made it possible for us to cross through the corridor, acquire over 13,000 acres of land within 1.5 years, the largest land acquisition project ever undertaken. Government was very quick in making payments. Over 20 billion shillings have been paid, and so far whatever hasn't been paid for phase one relates to where people had disputes, and those haven't been resolved either through courts or through the National Land Commission. We had a good contractor. Both works were done very quickly. The team from the National Land Commission did well to complete the process of land acquisition. But most importantly, given the kind of resistance that we experienced across the entire corridor, leadership from government, all the way from the president going through cabinet, was so critical in helping us achieve this project well ahead of schedule by 18 months. So we were able to launch the first passenger service on the 1st of June, and I'm very happy to say that so far we're almost doing close to 800,000 people, passengers, against our projections in 2011, which had shown that we'll possibly be able to do about 500,000 people per annum. So within a period of 7 months, we are hitting 800,000, and the demand is very high. The occupancy is high. At times, from November, we are experiencing even beyond 100%. Because of the intermediate stations where you can even get a seat occupied 2 or 3 times. Right. The passengers exiting from various
So the response has been phenomenal.
The response has been phenomenal.
All right. Let's hear from Patrick Obath, who's the Chairman of International Chamber of Commerce. Standard gauge railway, we thought, yes, people will have a frosty reception to it, but we saw coming towards the end of last year, the uptake of it, especially for the Mombasa destination with the Madaraka Express, was phenomenal, right? So hotels were overbooked, 100 capacity, of course, 100 occupation capacity in Mombasa as well. So people are, at least now, they're getting the gist of what the beauty of a standard gauge railway can actually bring into this country. What is your reaction?
I mean, I'm probably a full convert to the SGR. Again, full disclosure, I was actually...
Have you taken a ride with it, first of all?
My whole family went down over Christmas using the SGR.
Fantastic.
Right? And just that alone, for me, that experience, was that the cost of our holiday, instead of flying 6 people down to the coast, at a cost of that time of something like about 25,000 shillings per person return, I mean, I went economy at 720 shillings per person. So just by going by SGR alone, that paid for my holiday. I mean, it's a phenomenal change in terms of the cost of travel and the comfort of doing that. So I think Atanas is going to have a problem because the demand, because of this reduction of cost and the ease of travel, is extremely high. And literally, I think they'll have to start running 24-hour trains within a very short time. I think the only challenge here is access at the two ends. If you look at people coming from our country coming to join the SGR, you literally, you come from Meru, you come and drop off somewhere in River Road, then you go to find your transport from there to the SGR in order to sort of catch your way to, to the terminus, and then you're going out the other side. So I think the challenge now, I think, for us as a nation is to look at how to develop the spokes that feed the points at which the SGR is stopping. And until we do that, I don't think we're going to see the full benefits of the standard gauge railway. And I apply this both from the passenger side and the freight side.
Yes.
Right? Because I've heard of people sort of saying, fine, I left, instead of having to do all this, I would rather catch a bus in Meru that takes me straight to Mombasa. Right? And for that kind of passenger, the SGR doesn't make sense. Who goes by bus? But I think in time, with the easing of the access at each end, the SGR, I think, will have a serious issue in terms of meeting the capacity requirements. And I think it's going to also create, I think, a new dynamic in terms of transportation. Even the traditional bus companies, right? They'll have to change the way they operate and the way they treat passengers as well. We saw what happened on the roads in Kenya in December last year.
Yes.
Which was actually quite sad. So with the SGR coming on, the two things will happen. One, we hope that a lot of freight will move from the road to rail, which minimizes the number of large trucks that are sort of moving up and down the country.
Yes.
Which will then make the roads a little bit safer. I think most of it is from the way we as Kenyans drive, whether irrespective of whether you're driving a lorry, a bus, or a small car.
Yeah.
But I think it'll actually increase safety as well.
Right.
So,
increase safety.
So for me, overall, I think the SGR, if you look at the economy of the country, and I think maybe we'll go into that a bit later, I think it has a very positive contribution.
Fantastic. So the hub and spoke is one challenge that we can see as well. People have to drive all the way. Maybe if you arrive in Mombasa, you have maybe to take an Uber or a taxi, drive 2 hours to town. That also is proving to be a challenge as well. Let's hear from Mr. Desai. First of all, have you had an experience with SGR yourself?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
I did. And
okay.
I was pleasantly surprised. As Patrick said, not only was the ride efficient, but it was also breathtakingly beautiful, through Savo and being able to see our wildlife and our incredible culture, as well as the landscapes and so on. So it's not only an enjoyable ride, but it's I believe in time to come it'll be a major distinction in terms of tourism and the ability to appreciate the country.
All right. So, Mr. Stanas, you can tell us, first of all, as we drill deeper with this discussion, we have also the cargo line that is now has been launched so far, which is also going to dramatically change, of course, the scene of cargo transport in this country. There is a window period that you've given. This is dramatically also different from what the truck drivers are doing. But people are complaining that the slow uptake of the cargo with SGR is also frustrating. Why is that? It's not what you really expected with the Madaraka Express.
But that is not quite so.
It is not quite so. But before we come to you, I think I jumped Dr. Collins Odote here. Yeah, let him, as you're pondering on that, let's also hear from David Collins Odote, if you actually had an experience as well with SGR.
No, I haven't, but my kids used it of December. And I think for me that's the huge positive news that we need to underscore.
Yes.
I think the amounts of traffic that was seen over Christmas was extremely phenomenal. I know as early December, people were struggling to get tickets. The tickets were long overbooked. I think that's extremely positive. And I think the second, which the MD is talking about, is the reality that it works. But I think the other thing that we need to then ask ourselves is the lessons we learn from the process moving forward. Because sometimes in the heat of the moment, you forget to learn lessons. I think there are several things that would be important. Even in terms of the huge numbers, the thing we also need to deal with is the ticketing. Concerns about instance where people buy tickets essentially for trade. And we need to deal with that, because I know where people are saying, when you want to buy online, you can't get it. But you hear some people have physical tickets, so we need to ensure that it's available for citizens. But the second, which I think is critical, is what Patrick has said, because it's something also going to affect the transportation of goods, and that is in terms of the connectivity. The fact that, yes, the SGR is cheap, but the fact that I have to worry about how I reach Syokimau, and also once I'm dropped in Mombasa, how I go in. I think that's a huge challenge in terms of some of how we make it work. And I think the third thing we'll have to then discuss when we go into the details is the economics of the process.
The economics of the process.
I think that's going to be important. And for me, from an environmental perspective, he's spoken about the challenges around land reclamation, around compensation, but also around the EIA process. Are there things we could have done differently? Are there things we can do better into the future? I think those are things that would be important to discuss during this session.
Thank you. Maybe you can comment now on the container. So before we drill deeper to the economics of it, also regionally, how also is bound to affect us as a country if we do not really have other countries like Uganda and Tanzania really, warming up to this idea. Then what happens to us, servicing this particular debt that we know also is staggering, Mr. Atanas?
Thank you, Debarl. I think the place to start is to confirm that the implementation of SGR in Kenya is not an exclusive project for Kenya.
Yes.
SGR is being executed as what they call the regional mega projects. So it is a project under the East African Community, where all the members of the member states agreed that they were going to implement standard gauge railway project for the region, and each country was responsible of undertaking its own section within its own country. Yes. It only happens that Kenya has moved faster. We are implementing our own bit. Phase 1 is already complete. We've already started phase 2A, which is Nairobi going through towards Narok, and phase 2B, which is Naivasha going through to Kisumu, and phase 2C to Malaba is also now under funding identification stage. As far as phase 1 is concerned, the issue around freight service, one would be able to say that when we started off, this project was completed 18 months ahead of schedule. So a lot of things that we are doing now, we are already operating. We shouldn't have actually been operating. We'd be now making preparations for the final handover and all. The actual final handover date for the project is 30th of May of this year.
Yes.
But you can see the steps that we've been able to, the strides that we've been able to make in this period. Started off the passenger service. 7 months later, you've seen the numbers that we've been able to do, and I'm happy the panelists have been able to enjoy all those. They have something to say about it. On the freight side, we were going to start on the 1st of January. But well before that, in June, when we had a farming situation in the country, we were able to move, between June and December, we moved 200,000 tons of grain, which is about 6,000 containers, about 70 trains. So we've been able to try the corridor, we've been able to try the timelines, we've been able to train the staff as far as cargo movement is concerned, the handling from one end to the other. That has been tested. So what we are doing now is to go into commercial operations. Now, what has held us back was the fact that the inland container depot, which is a critical facility where cargo will be handled from the port, had not been completed.
Yes.
That we completed on the 16th of December. That the commissioning was done on that date, and the President presided over the handover ceremony. What is important about that was to say now the final end as far as the handling of cargo on the Nairobi side was complete. Now, unlike passengers, where you can say tomorrow we have a train scheduled at 9 o'clock and you'll find people, cargo, the cargo that we are targeting is largely import and export cargo. So it's in a chain of what is international business, and it has rules. You can't go to the port and pick a container and load it on SGR just because it's going to Nairobi. It's a whole chain of process. The process of importation, the process of export, takes months. It takes months, weeks to get processed through. So importantly, for example, the final destination of a container is known well maybe 6 weeks before the container gets to the port. From the time the cargo is shipped, the final destination is known. In our case, the ICD had not been in place. It only came into place on the 16th of December. So we are now sensitizing cargo owners that we now have a ready facility where they can bring their cargo to. That said, in the last 20 days, we've done in excess of 1,000 containers. What does that say? That people, the cargo owners, have realized this facility is ready. We've done a bit of sensitization, and they are changing the point of delivery of their cargo the mode of delivery from Mombasa, a CFS in Mombasa, or transport by road, and already engaging KRA and KPA to change the point of delivery to ICD. And that is very positive. In the next few weeks, as we get into February, as we get into March, you'll be able to see that there will be a major uptick of cargo. We have given promotion of pricing for people to try the service. They've had bad experience with rail. They've not experienced SGR. We want them to try.
Thank you.
And they're happy about it.
Right, but also with the Kenya International Freight Warehouse Association, that is KIFRA, they wanted you to clarify the cost. I'm happy that you're mentioning the cost and the volume to be handled, and also the clearance modalities as well. That is still very murky. They're not really aware, but of course you'll answer that just much later in the program. But let's hear from Patrick Obath. The cargo handling, do you think this will actually have a good uptick compared to truck drivers?
I think what any person using any freight system is looking at the lowest cost from source of freight to their warehouse. That whole chain has got to work. Now, if any part of the chain, whether it is by road or by rail, creates a bottleneck, then effectively the owner of the cargo who is paying will want to choose the lowest cost route. Now, if you look at the rail system, and as Atanas has said, there are still bottlenecks within that whole freight system. I am aware that there are moves to do this single window, which in fact has been around for almost 2 years. And what that was supposed to do was to ensure that by the time your cargo is in the high seas, you are able to pre-lodge all the documents, get all the government agencies that are supposed to clear that cargo to actually go through the process of clearing. So by the time that cargo arrives, and especially container arrives in Mombasa,
yes,
it literally can just leave the ship and go straight onto whatever it is that is supposed to transport it out of the port, whether it is by road or by rail. And then the clearing and everything else will be done literally within hours. This is trying to emulate the ports of Dubai, Singapore, and you've got Felixstowe, a lot of the international ports. Literally, the residence time of cargo in the port is minimal. What we're seeing, if I digress a little bit, is that our ports are being expanded to store containers, not to increase the total volume of freight going through them. And that, I think, is the challenge that we need to address, is the speed of clearing of cargo. And then once it gets on the SGR, I think at this end, the inland container depot have to think slightly differently. What I've seen in the more efficient container depots is that when Atanas' train arrives, yes, with, say, 60 containers,
yes,
they come onto a siding, and there are 60 trucks waiting for those containers at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And so your RTG, your rubber tired gantry, or whatever they're using, basically offloads a container straight onto the trucks waiting, and within an hour or 2 hours, that train is ready to move and go back, and those 60 trucks are out of the container depot, and they've gone. That really, if we can get to a point where that happens, mm-hmm, that the train arrives, and within an hour, the trucks are lined up, and within another hour, all the freight is off. That is the nirvana we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, then as a freight person, I can say it will arrive in the port in Mombasa pre-cleared. It will then be able to get straight onto the train waiting the minute that the ship arrives, and then it is on its way to Nairobi, and by the following day, actually I'm taking it out of the port, out of the inland container depot in Nairobi. That really, I think, is where we've got to challenge KR, plus it's all the agencies to actually get us to that point.
Right, but is it surprising that we're still talking about clearing modalities, and that I think you've alluded to the single window system that is operative right now? That should have been clarifying all this, and why should they be crying foul that, yeah, KRA needs to clarify on the clearing modalities? The single window system should address this, or maybe they don't really have an interface where Kenya Railway has an input on that particular portal. Let's hear from you, Desai.
I think that this is absolutely crucial, how we integrate such advanced infrastructures into our local economy. And I think that what should have happened, and it's probably a lesson learned, that we need to have a stronger engagement with the economic sectors in the planning phases, mm-hmm, of such initiatives. we have seen success in the first phase in certain areas which demonstrate that we need to work far harder within the planning structures. One of the successes was that the cement sector was able to supply cement into the railway in the construction phase. But this required a lot of effort in the beginning and in the planning phase to ensure that they had access to this opportunity. We've seen aspects of certain areas of human capital development, the ability to promote occupational standards in certain areas like instrumentation control, welding, and so on, which will now play a significant role in the next phase, where young people will be able to be highly skilled to build these railways. We've seen aspects of an accord being developed between the Kenyan steel sector and the Ugandan steel sector in order to promote steel development in this area. So the point is that, you know, increasing dialogue, increasing collaboration has to be put in, and that's why this consortium was developed, in order to bring in all stakeholders in the beginning and to ensure that we're able to plan all the interfaces and, as Patrick said, all the spokes and so on. And that's the thinking we need to move to, because we've seen a lot of success so far, that when we do are proactive and we do act in terms of the planning, the optimization of the railway, the optimization of infrastructure can also yield greater dividends. And this in turn could also lead to transferability. As Atanas said, you know, we're looking into an inclusive structure which informs LAPSET, Northern Corridor, and other projects. So in many ways, this particular project becomes the catalyst for socio-economic transformation throughout our competitive sectors as far as value creation, job opportunities, and you know, what you're trying to emphasize on, the competitiveness of this particular infrastructure project.
All right, let's hear from Collins before we take a short break. Very briefly.
I think it's possible to say that maybe some of the challenges being faced are teething problems. That's one way of looking at it, and they will get solved over time. But I think the other way to look at it from a lessons perspective is that we could have done much more public engagement and public consultations. Because just in December, I was speaking to a friend of mine who works in a manufacturing sector, and saying, yeah, I know transportation of freight is going to start in January, but the bigger concern that I have is looking at the math. The math is still not adding up for me. Because if I am supposed to transport this to Uganda, the cost I will incur to get it onto the SGR, the cost I will incur here in Nairobi against it, so I will still need trucks. And looking at it, I might as well still just take the truck all the way to Uganda. And I think that's something that, A, we could have foreseen, and we could have reduced the negative implications much more. Going back to passengers, you see the benefits that people drove in December. But this wasn't as robustly discussed and appreciated at the time the thing was starting. A lot of effort was expended on the one instance from government and from SGR. Let's just get going.
Yes.
From the public is, no, but my concerns, my negativities are not going to be addressed. So we didn't get sufficient time to discuss what does this mean for us as a country once we address the real challenges that are going to be there. And I think that for me is one of the lessons, that as we go on, we must always, as the implementers, not understate the negativities. We must honestly and robustly discuss them and collectively find, by the way, how do we get solutions to them? How do we address some of the challenges? So that as people are moving, everybody is, you're not struggling as you are rolling out now to say, can we now talk to the freight handlers? Can we now talk to the manufacturers that were on board as the things are going on? So for me, that's one of the other lessons that I get from this process.
All right. So also you can get to drive a show with me. Please remember to call in, ask your questions, or share your contribution as far as SGR is concerned. Mr. Maina, we promised when we'll circle back, of course, we'll hear from you. Talk to us about the challenges. This is connectivity and also the clearing modality. We thought with the single window system that was launched recently, of course, this will be easier for the clearance. So the freighters should not be actually complaining about this.
Thank you, Debarl. If you allow me, I'll start by addressing the issue, touching on just the systems around the freight side on the passenger side. You realize that when we started off the passenger service,
yes,
we started issuing tickets genuinely believing that everybody will be on board and people will not start doing monkey business as far as ticketing was concerned. No sooner had that started, our good people saw a window, and they started off cartels that were dealing with tickets. In a matter of time, we escalated our security features, we introduced IDs, we introduced names onto the ticket. Sooner than later, again, they found a way of circumventing that. We've now been able to introduce the USSD code, where you buy using the USSD code, and we've also gone and introduced an online system. So now 60% of our ticketing is now done online. So you buy from where you are seated. You don't have to go to the terminus. And if you have to go to the terminus, now we are demanding that you must produce your original ID. We have delayed the period of refunds because people had even gone to an extent where they buy, they don't intend to travel, and as soon as they find you and the tickets are all taken, they'll sell to you, they'll return, get a refund, and even with a fee, they are not caring. So that we've been able to address. We are upscaling it to allow other payment systems to be able to integrate into our online payment system, and I believe that situation will be resolved. Now, as far as the freight side is concerned, we have our own system, a freight management system that has already been introduced, SIOS. It has been integrated with the Kwato system, which is operated by Kenya Ports Authority, and also the KRA system. Just alluding to what Patrick did talk about earlier, the ability of those systems to talk to each other and to make it possible for cargo owners to clear their cargo, even pre-clear their cargo. That is already something that we are working with KRA and KPA. Yesterday we had a meeting with what they call authorized economic operators. Those are business people who are either in a clearing or logistics business or cargo owners who, as far as KRA is concerned, have been vetted, have been found to be, in terms of their governance framework, the way they run their business, the way they import, are people who can be trusted.
Yes.
We had over 100 of them. Those are people who KRA is testing as far as the pre-clearance process is concerned. They are the ones we're targeting for the ICD. They are large businesses. So with those, and KRA has also introduced new scanning systems where cargo will be scanned in motion from Mombasa. By the time the cargo gets into Nairobi, they really know what they need to verify or what needs to go to the customer's warehouse. And that way will reduce the holding time within their inland container depot. So a lot of work has been done around that. We've introduced a one-stop shop center at ICD and in Mombasa. So you have all the staff from KRA, Kenya Railways, KPA, and even other agencies seated on the same location to address matters arising with the as far as the cargo owners are concerned.
Yes.
Now, on the issue of connectivity.
Yes, please.
This matter is on the passenger side. You would call it, it's really an urban mobility problem. It's not an SGR issue. That even if we move you from Mombasa has been one of the areas where we have received a lot of complaints. The road that was initially a problem has already been done. But as soon as you get into Magongo Road, you get into Mombasa traffic. That is not an SGR issue. However, it's a government issue which has been recognized, and there is work being done by Kenha and Kura, and the county government also has to do some work in order to ensure that there is better experience for Mombasa travelers or people traveling within Mombasa city. But Kenya Railways is also looking at the possibility of introducing a line connection, about 2-kilometer connection we need to do from Mombasa terminus to Meritini station, on the meter gauge station, that can be able to move passengers right into the city center. That is something we are working on. And that will help to ease at least the passengers. But by the way, the passengers we move, one single train, are themselves a traffic problem, because you're moving 1,200 people at once.
Right.
So they also create our own traffic.
Do you have any time frame given to this as well?
That is currently under study. We'll be able to get that report in the next month, and then we'll look for what is needed in terms of funding. You still need to do a lot of earthworks in that section. You still need to buy equipment for it. So that may take in excess of a year. But importantly, the southern bypass, what we call Dongokundu Road, is opening by March. That will also help to relieve traffic.
Okay.
It will create another route for traffic within Mombasa area, Mombasa side. And when it gets to connect to the other side, to south coast, then it also remove traffic that goes back into the city, into Mombasa city, because those who are going to south coast will cross directly. Now, on the Nairobi side, we already introduced a link from the city center. We have a train service that runs from Nairobi city, our old railway station, into the SGR terminus, and that has helped a lot. Public transport providers themselves the people who run buses and matatus, are also providing a very essential service. They are now able to pick. They have identified nodes where most of the passengers are coming from, and those passengers are picked and dropped into the terminuses. You have places in, we've seen them picking passengers from Nairobi terminus. People who are going to Bungoma no longer need to come to the city. People going to Meru, people going to Nyeri. So in some way there has been a disruption and a reorganization that we are all fitting into.
Thank you. Let us see from Patrick Obath.
I think, Atanas, is something that you're missing as SGR and Kenya Railways. And this is probably something that a discussion that needs to take place with the government. Mm-hmm. In most places, you have a proper bus terminus at the railway station. And I think it is crucial that we actually develop a proper bus terminus exclusively for the kinds of buses you're talking about, the ones from Bungoma and everything else, where there's a timetable for them to come, and they have to be forced to do that, so that you have a bus terminus, a proper bus terminus for cross-country and also local buses at the major terminuses that you have. And then they should have proper exit and coming in. So I think as part of this whole infrastructure development, there's also the thinking that we should change, so that instead of going to the Machakos bus station or wherever it is, we have a good bus terminus so that the different modes of transport actually sort of seamlessly link together. And I think as you're going to 2B, which is taking us to Kisumu, it is probably right now the time to actually have that discussion in Kisumu and look at the sort of the whole integration of that terminus into the transportation system in that region.
But what if you have the old railway gauge that he was talking about, like we do have in Syokimau, the
that is stopgap at the moment. I'm talking more about, this is basically catering for people who are going to the center of Mombasa. The SGR, if I'm sure that most of the people who take it actually go into the hinterland of that place. So there's two things. There is the sort of the commute into the center of the business district, whether it's in Mombasa or Nairobi, but more so the sort of the moving of those 1,200 people extremely quickly, so that they don't have to take multiple forms of transport. Mm-hmm. And that's the key thing. If you can actually get people to take the transport of their destination at the point where they arrive, it will be a lot more efficient. But obviously, without having the sort of the infrastructure leading into and out of the SGR, which is alluded to, right, it will be difficult to do that.
Right,
so I think let's get it right in Kisumu. Yeah,
before we come to, let's say from Kevit, first of all, of course, if I pay 750 shillings and then I have to take, an Uber and pay 2,000, it beats the sense of actually the SGR itself being cheaper at the end of the day. Isn't that the case?
Yes, that's right. I mean, it is the case, and what you're looking at is the multiplier effects now, of this transportation system. In 2007, when private sector first started engaging the government over the proposition of a competitive railway,
yes,
there were several asks. We asked for 10,000 acres around each station, so that we could build economic structures, hotels, and key areas of
yes,
structure. In realization that in first world countries, these infrastructures, once laid, they have transformative effects in terms of other multiplier opportunities in terms of tourism, retail, manufacturing, and so on. Mm-hmm. And that required extensive planning around such an infrastructure project. And so I think that, as we realize, the full investment of this railway and the possibility to mitigate debt and really optimize on the utilization, a lot of forward planning has to be done around the potential. We also talked about back then, and we consistently engage the entire system towards local manufacturing and services, because this kind of structure has the potential of creating many more enterprises and bringing about a competitive transformation in our services sector and manufacturing sector. What has to happen is that all of these issues are multi-stakeholder and sector-based, and that is why it's so crucial that a lot more integration and collaboration is achieved, as we go forward. Otherwise, what happens is what we're in our current state, where we're reactive to situations, and it becomes challenging. But at the same time, it has an effect on the total investment of such infrastructure projects. So I think that now we're left to our ability to be creative in trying to solve problems as they come. But having understood this first phase of this railway, I think that a lot more effort has to be promoted as an integration of all stakeholders, government, private sector, civil society, and so on, academia and so on, in order to have a far more integrated plan.
Thank you. Let's see from Collins Odote.
I actually think that Atanas is not right by saying it is not an SGR problem. It has to be an SGR problem, because at the end of the day, the complaint will not be made to the matatu drivers and to the bus drivers. It will be made to SGR. And once it becomes an SGR problem, it becomes a government problem.
Yes.
Because if we say, for example, that for the next 1 year, we are studying how to solve the Mombasa one. So it means that for the ordinary passenger, they're going to have a 1 year of challenge. Yet we are saying the SGR will, by then, will have been operating for close to 2 years. So we have 2 years of a problem that we could have foreseen. And that's the purpose of planning. And that's why, for me, I agree with Patrick that as we go to phase 2A and 2B, let's not still continue with the assumption that that problem of connectivity is an urban mobility problem, not something for SGR. SGR must deal with it. Because at the end of the day, you don't want a situation where something that is good is being frustrated, or citizens are getting frustrated because of something we could have solved. There is no reason, Debarl, why you must spend much more to reach the terminus than you spend to go to Mombasa. It just defeats economic sense, and it's something we can solve, and it will even improve business. Because if we have a situation where there are dedicated buses that picks and drops, in some countries it's even free.
Yes.
So it could even be part of your ticket, so that when I get a ticket, I am told that to reach you, if you're getting a ticket from town, if you're getting a ticket to go to Mombasa, there'll actually be a bus that takes you at this destination, and you're not paying for it.
Yes.
Then it enhances the level, the ease within which citizens are traveling. It happens in other parts of the world, and I think it can happen here.
Okay. Maybe let's drill down deeper now to the economics of it. First of all, I mentioned that, yes, you know, the Mombasa governor was taking special umbrage that the fact that Kenya Ports Authority are the people who are guaranteeing this loan, the 327 billion shillings, or an estimation, I think that's a ballpark figure. And yet, it is said that the assumption is the Kenya Railway Corporation is the one which is actually guaranteeing this particular loan. Would you want to clarify on that as well?
I would want to say that that is erroneous.
Erroneous? Okay.
It is erroneous because Kenya Railways,
Yes, just continue. Yep.
or Kenya Ports Authority actually do not have capacity to guarantee that kind of a facility. This facility is guaranteed by the National Treasury. It is the agreements that were signed between China Exim Bank were signed China Exim Bank and the National Treasury.
Yes.
This is paid for and guaranteed by the government. There is an agreement entered into between Kenya Railways and Kenya Ports Authority, which we call a take or pay agreement. And what that does is really to address what are the concerns of a cargo owner. That you have an efficient railway system that has been constructed using public funds. So KPA is obligated, as the user for whom that infrastructure has been developed,
Yes.
to maximize its use. So we have an understanding between ourselves and KPA to make sure that the cargo that comes through the port that is destined for Nairobi then must be delivered through SGR. And that is the simple understanding. In fact, it was just about 35–40% of the cargo containers coming through should be delivered through SED. It's as simple as that.
So there's no actually the reason of actually having this loan that will be paid in 10 years from guaranteed by the Kenya Ports Authority, as he's claiming, or you say this is purely erroneous?
The term of the loan was 20 years.
20 years.
20 years, five years grace period, which will kick in 2021 because we finished the project before time, and then 15 years repayment period. But that is an understanding between China Exim Bank and the National Treasury. So it's the national government dealing with this issue. For KPA and Kenya Railways, that is at the operational level.
Okay.
Yeah. How we get business onto the SGR.
All right. So he thinks that you mentioned a take or pay contract. He thinks that 80% of the clearing and forwarding contracts actually will not be happening in Mombasa, and so most of actually the handlers there are bound to lose their jobs as well. That is a fear, especially as we're going the Naivasha way as well.
One of the objectives of standard gauge railway development was to target lowering down the cost of transport and logistics,
yes,
as a factor that informs the cost of production or the cost of goods and services.
Yes.
The challenge that we have in the way we handle our cargo currently is that this cargo comes from the port, it is tracked somewhere into Mombasa city.
Yes.
It is held there for some time. It is then tracked out of Mombasa, taken to Nairobi or taken to the final destination. That costs the cargo owner or the final consumer, it costs money. The cost that we were trying to address was not just the railage cost. It's the whole chain. You need to deal with the whole chain if you're going to realize the ultimate benefit of lowering down the cost of production of goods and services. So when you cut off, when you deal with that, those inefficiencies is what causes the cost to go high. So if you deal with those inefficiencies, that you are now, a cargo owner is able to pick his container from the port and receive it in Nairobi where it is required within 3 or 4 days and not a month, then they're able to plan better. So instead of having an inventory in their warehouse of 20 containers, now they can keep 5. What does that mean? He's holding lesser stocks because he has a reliable transport system. He has more resources, or he has lower overdraft. Then he can expand his business. He can use his overdraft to expand his business and all. That is a roll-on effect. So we're not just talking about the cost of railage. We're talking about the whole issue of the whole supply chain, improving on its efficiency. So what would happen for those people who've been undertaking that business on that line? We've only developed a corridor of 472 kilometers. There are opportunities that opens in Nairobi. The bulk of the cargo comes into Nairobi.
Yes.
So if you address that problem, you resolve Nairobi. There's a lot of cargo that goes across the border.
Yes.
It takes innovation for now people to reorient themselves and identify any opportunities without necessarily loading costs into, without providing any really worthwhile service. We've seen situations where providers of service, just because they move a paper from here to the vice desk, they're charging $200, $100, $300. That is what we need to address as a whole, as an industry, for private sector, so that then you can start talking about reducing the cost of goods and services, not just a regular charge.
Thank you. Let's get into the economics of it, Patrick Obath.
I think what Atanas has said is part of the challenges we face when we move into new technology and new ways of working. A lot of people have invested in the old way, right? The container freight stations, as far as I'm concerned, were completely unnecessary in the first place. But they came about because we had inefficiencies in the system. The port was getting congested, so you had to take the containers out.
Yes. And
then you now created a whole industry around clearing containers in a container freight station, and so forth and so on. So that was purely because of the inefficiencies of our extraction of containers into the country and inland. As that gets more efficient, all those other services that developed around the inefficiency are going to basically have to die. And that is why you're having this toing and froing about, killing Mombasa, killing this and everything else. Those investments have to transition into something different. And I think that is a challenge that you're seeing. People are not thinking about what we can do different. They're thinking about protecting what we have. And once we get out of that and begin to look at, I think, the efficiencies that can be obtained through using technology and using smarter ways of moving goods, we will begin to get the cost efficiencies. I think the other thing we've got to look at as well, and this is for the SGR to be able to lower the cost of freight, is the return freight. Because at the moment, if I'm any businessman, I would actually ensure that my average, the turnaround time is funded, right? Mombasa, Nairobi, Mombasa. Now, if I'm not getting anything on the Nairobi-Mombasa route, I'll build that cost into the total cycle.
Yes.
So I know we really have to also look at encouraging people to actually load containers on the basis that the export system is also going to work. And if we do that, then effectively you're loading the train both ways, and the unit cost going both ways then comes down. So I think we have to look overall at the opportunities that the SGR presents. I think the other costs that we're not putting in, and this is the cost, not the cost, but the savings to the economy in total, right? Because we may just look at the SGR itself and look at the costs and everything else. But if you look around the other things that sort of are collateral in a way, if you remove that large number of containers from the road, then the cost of that infrastructure, the road, is going to go down, right? It's getting a beating because, one, people don't load properly, your axle loads are not met, and therefore the design parameters for the roads are actually exceeded. So you find the new roads that are being built within about 2 or 3 years, you get these ruts in the middle because it was not designed for that kind of axle load. The whole issue of people dying on the road, as I said earlier, that one, again, there'll be a shift in those statistics.
The safety issue.
Right? The safety issues and so forth. Then the Patrick Obath who want to drive down to the coast will be able to drive down in, say, 7 hours or 6 hours, even using the existing roads, rather than the 12 plus hours that it takes now. So that means that in terms of time, you're going to save a lot of time in the country. So I think if you look at the peripheral benefits to the country and just look at the impact of that on the GDP, you begin to understand why sometimes people look at an infrastructure project and only look at it in its narrow sense, rather than looking at the multiplier effect it has on the economy. And I think we need to start having that kind of conversation whenever we talk about infrastructure.
All right. Yeah, let's say for Kevit.
Yes, I think, this requires extensive engagement. We would like to see to it that in the next phase that we promote local manufacturing and services. This would further address, the debt burden of such an infrastructure project. And we need to bear in mind that if we build excellence in providing inputs to this railway, then they're transferable to other infrastructure projects like oil and gas, the electrical systems, etc., and so on, the Northern Corridor, LAPSET, and so on. And so this requires a very, reactive and a determined phase where we engage to ensure that we create the necessary planning in view of the gains that we could actually achieve. The other aspects in terms of promoting further human capital development, the ability to put more emphasis on skills would ensure that more standards are developed, and these in turn would be transferable into our entire economy. And we must not lose sight of the potential of how this railway and this excellence informs the development of other railways in Uganda and so on. We've seen a steel accord being signed between the steel manufacturers in Kenya and Uganda. This says something, and it shows and should provide motivation for us to promote regional integration based on manufacturing excellence. If we're able to supply steel, supply cement into other railways and so on, it promotes further integration. It promotes integration based on demand. And most importantly, it is the reason for a competitive demand with international standards. And so I think that this whole challenge has to be seen as a way in which we distinctively bring in all stakeholders to appreciate and understand the extent. And the motivation, the key motivation, is that we get an investment which yields as efficiently as possible, and also addresses, unnecessary debt promoted by obtaining inputs from abroad unnecessarily, or skills from abroad. And I think that this thinking has to take place, and at a much larger level towards a greater national debate as to what these new economies of mega projects have to yield in terms of an economic incentive for such infrastructure projects.
All right. This is from Dr. Collins.
Debarl, there's a very interesting article in the Business Daily today by Bitange, talking about innovation, and the fact that as a country we haven't fully exploited our innovation potential.
Yes.
And I think it goes to the complaints about clearing and forwarding. The reality is that I don't think, in my view, that overall we are going to have jobs being lost. I think what we are going to have are changes, because goods are still going to be cleared. The question may just be who is clearing, where they are being cleared, and how fast they are being cleared. And I think we must be able to start up discussing as a country and saying, anytime we create change, we disturb the normal. And what we may have not done well is in terms of honest and robust conversations and supply of information to identify what are the changes going to be created, how do we adjust to those changes. Let's take, for example, clearing and forwarding. Assuming that it was even true that clearing will not be taking place as much as it was with the clearing and forwarders in Mombasa. But we've just 5 minutes ago been talking about the connectivity, that's new business. We've just been talking about the numbers going to Mombasa. That's new business to Mombasa. So we need to look at it in terms of, so if you lose X, what are you gaining?
Yes.
And who is gaining the other thing? And I think that's the one that, because we discuss things in silos, we discuss it as if there is an SGR in Nairobi, there's another SGR in Mombasa, there's a third one in Naivasha, and because we haven't, for me I think, built our national psyche in looking at this thing, we still look at it from our small lens. What does it do for Obath? What does it do for Collins? What does it do for Atanas? Not what does it do for Kenya? Where are the losses? Where are the gains? And overall, how are we dealing with that? I think if we deal with that robust, we might realize there are actually a lot of economic opportunities that we still are not exploiting, because we didn't think about them well, and we didn't plan them much more effective. And for me, I think that's where the challenge is, because I don't think that we spend all these amounts of billions to lose jobs. It simply doesn't make economic sense. And anybody saying that, I think, is being simplistic. I think the better issue is, yes, there are certain people who are going to be disturbed negatively because of the changes, and we need to appreciate that and ask ourselves, so what is the benefits they're getting? Because somebody might discover today I am doing clearing and forwarding, tomorrow I might actually be good as an agent on something completely different concerning the SGR. So it's just about people appreciating, and that's maybe a challenge also for private sector. How do they engage the small businesses so that they're able to appreciate the large opportunities that this kind of mega projects bring on board?
Oh yeah, before we go regional, I would like us also to tackle the issue of land compensation, because that has been a very ticklish issue, and I was expecting to get also Senator Mpaye to be here with us from the Senate Transport Committee to tell us about, because he is actually coming from Kajiado, will tell us how that has been a challenge. We've seen locals in Kajiado really crying foul, first of all, because of job distribution, that even the Chinese are taking the menial jobs in Kajiado. And then the land issue has become a very ticklish issue. As we're discussing this, maybe you can just try and clarify on that, the compensation bit of it, and maybe if Patrick Obath, you have a question also for Chair, for Bona CEO, you can also chip in, or Obath or Desai as well.
I think what I was going to say is that I think because of the size and spread of the project that the SGR is, we are seeing the nasty side of Kenya.
The nasty side of Kenya.
Yes, exactly. Land compensation, ethnicization of jobs, saying if you pass through my constituency, you have to employ my people for this portion you're going to do,
yes,
and so forth and so on. I mean, this really is something we have to grow up out of as a country.
Yes.
And I think maybe Atanas can tell us his experience, because we see the SGR as being almost like a villain for this. And yet, we forget even the fact that the 400 kV line from Suswa all the way to Rabai in Mombasa, that was supposed to export all carrier power to the coast and make the cost of electricity cheaper, also delayed for almost 2 years because of 40 kilometers of a land dispute, right? The same thing has happened with the transmission of power from the wind farm,
yes, in
Masabit coming down.
Yes.
There were originally a lot of delays because of land issues. We also have the Kipeto wind farm, which was in Kinangop, the Kinangop wind farm, that was killed for exactly the same reason. So I think once you talk about the issues at the SGR, I think Atanas really tells what is it that you've seen in terms of this that we can learn from, that allows us to then create a better framework for having that discussion across the whole country. Because if we don't, effectively, we are going to put up the cost of infrastructure and the cost of investment in this country is just going to go high for no reason at all and become uncompetitive.
All right. Desai, you wanted to say something? Yes.
I think that this project bears on our success in terms of attracting more infrastructure projects, yes, and investment from abroad. So maybe my question to Atanas is this, that, in view of the fact that these projects have a definite requirement for standards in terms of skills, which are the main barrier towards accessing these projects for gainful employment, what can be done in order to build a better ecosystem that supplies the competencies required for welders, for plumbing, for technicians, but most importantly, how can we now promote the phase where the greatest profit lies in terms of maintaining, for example, signaling systems by local service providers, maintaining communication systems, because this all paves the way to future sustainability. and the ability to depend on the nation's capacities to provide solutions to this railway.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we work this ecosystem? How does I'm aware that the Railways is putting up a school, a technical institute, etc., and so on. But how do we work it at grassroots level, at county level,
mm-hmm.
where the biggest impact could be obtained, and where you could transform economies at various counties as the railway passes through,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to what's happening now, that the railways come through several counties, but it's just passed. There's no legacy of skills development in the institutions,
yes.
etc., and so on. So how do we turn that around?
Yeah, maybe Atanas will tell us more about that, and maybe to clarify on the whole issue of land compensation. Before I maybe chip in, you wanted us to weigh in on that,
Yeah, I wanted
so
to
that
talk about something
Atanas can just
Atanas can then respond. Because I got slightly disturbed with Patrick's economic look at the challenges
yes.
that are affecting us. He made the point that locals always agitate for jobs and we must get out of it. I don't think we should. Because I think we must realize that if we are talking about sustainability, sustainability has an economic aspect, it has a human aspect, it has an environmental aspect. And part of getting a social license for the communities is ensuring that if you're doing construction and it's passing through them, surely you don't want a situation where all the young people who have been idle in Asumbi, where
yes.
I come from, are seeing a road being constructed and it's being constructed by strangers. Yet all these people are doing is, for example, carrying soil. They can also carry soil. And I think that is something we must be able to integrate much more. Land compensation, for me, in my honest view, I think despite the structure of the National Land Commission, I still think we haven't gotten it right in terms of dealing with it. Because when a government project comes, the project is run largely, sometimes like a big project like this, by national government. The land on which it is passing on has different ownership structures.
Yes.
Some of it is owned by communities, others are owned by individuals, others is owned by the public. But I think the mechanisms for discussing compensation and agreeing on to it is sometimes left to the owner of the investor to start doing the negotiations with the National Land Commission only facilitating. I think we need to ensure when we are having a big project like this, we have a more robust conversation in terms of land compensation. Identify the different places land is going to pass and be able to have a wholesale negotiation so that we are clear up front, that we don't have a situation where you're having one conversation in Miritini, another one in Voi, a third one in Narok. And when you do so, you will have to appreciate the fact that, for some community, this quarter of an acre is all they have in terms of their livelihoods.
Yes.
So we need to be sensitive in terms of how we deal with it. But if we don't deal with it robustly, then we'll continue having these challenges where the next time that I see a project is when I wake up in the morning and I find that there's some construction taking place around my house. And yes. I'm debating for myself, what do I do? Do I keep quiet? Do I protest? Do I go and talk to the company? And yet that could be solved much more easily if we relooked at the manner in which we address issues of land compensation. Because at the end of the day, we must balance. We must be able to balance the social interest. We must be able to balance the environmental concerns, even as we do economic progress.
All right, thank you. And I think you need also to clarify, Mr. Atanas, that we have also the China Road and the Bridge Corporation officials, landowners are complaining that they have been seeking to make informal arrangements. This is about acquiring their land while continuing with the work before the conclusion of the formal process by the National Lands Commission. Also, a landowner reported that the Chinese contractors usually meet with the landowners in the company of the area MCA and provincial administration officials, and then they accept the deal and allow a construction on their land, and they're asked to sign an agreement, and then they start receiving a monthly allowance of 20,000 shillings per acre. I don't know if this is true or you've heard of these allegations, and this is what actually Collins is really talking about in the first place. Okay. You've heard about these allegations? Yes, thanks.
Thank you very much, Debarl. Maybe before I answer those questions, let me just address myself to the issue that was raised by Dr. Odote and Patrick. And this is about how we are addressing ourselves to the question of urban mobility. Whereas from our perspective, we are saying this is not our problem. What I meant is that we were executing a project from one end to another. So we were addressing ourselves to that project. But there are situations that it has generated that need to be addressed. And what are we doing about them? For example, I would say on the Mombasa side, we've completed a feasibility study on how we need to address the urban mobility problem using a commuter rail system within Mombasa.
Yes.
Unfortunately, because of its economics, it cannot go to funding stage. So we have to look at how to reorganize it. Because then you need to address the whole problem of somebody leaving the Mombasa terminus to be able to go all the way to Kilifi side.
Yes.
That's then you address the entire problem. For the Nairobi side, we've been using our commuter rail system. We don't do good numbers. We're still doing about 15,000 people a day. But we're also looking at how to escalate it so that even if you are dropped at the Nairobi Central Station here, you can still take your train to go to Roiro, to go to Thika, to go to Kikuyu, which services we operate only in the morning and in the evening. But with time, these are some things that we can be able to improve on and provide a service. So we are addressing it, but if we had the resources that we need, those are issues that we'll be able to tackle. Now, this is the issue of stakeholders. I think Dr. Odote talked about negativities of a project and what it is that we have seen. Largely, the project has seemed to appear in a negative light because one is the breadth of it. That, for example, the phase 1, we had to engage up to 8 counties. This was a new constitutional dispensation.
Yes.
Before then, we were doing a project of this nature. You would not have any reason to go to water. There was no governor. It would be a project of national government, provincial administration have given a direction, and you pass your way between Mombasa and Nairobi. To the level of engagement that you need, even the mapping out of your stakeholders is quite different. So you need to go to, like in this case, our experience was you needed to go to each of the governors, you needed to engage the county commissioner as a representative of national government. Those are 2 different situations before you bring them together. So you go to the county commissioner, you tell them what you're trying to do, how it will impact, you get lessons from them, go to the county government, the governor, you discuss it. If he needs his cabinet to be part of the process that you need to take them through, you take them through,
Yes.
and then you expect buy-in. Thereafter, then you find a point of entry to engage the other leaders and the public as a whole. This was, in some counties, it was very good experience. In others, we had very good discussions with the leadership. They understood. We negotiated what needs to be done, including CSR. But as soon as you walked out of their offices, the next thing you find is that the project has been politicized. And you would appreciate that at our level, as a corporation,
yes,
we will not be able to address ourselves to political questions. So you possibly then would not be able to be in the media as much as possible, trying to say, to kind of clarify what politicians said, because you've sat with them and you've explained to them and they have understood what the project is all about. So that is a challenge that possibly we've found it even on the other phases. But in some such institutions, we also found governors who are very supportive. We created structures that allowed county liaison officers from the county, locals who would work for us, paid by us, to represent local interests, to engage with the locals, and in many situations they did work. We have situations that we are experiencing now on the other side, which is largely in Narok and Nakuru County.
Before you explain the land compensation, sorry to butt in, we have Patrick who's hanging on the line also, maybe will want to chime in as well. Good morning, Patrick.
Yes, good morning, Ba.
Good morning to you. You have a question or a contribution for our panelists this morning?
Yes, a quick one.
Yes, please.
Specifically to the Managing Director, Kenya Railways.
Yes, please. Please, go full steam ahead.
Yes, it is a robust discussion. I like it.
Thank you very much.
What I wanted to inquire, I'll just maybe ask the Managing Director. Is it by design that we don't have any queue, we don't have any restaurants in our railway station? Is that by design? Because I've been out there in other countries, really. That is a good place for people to set up small kiosks, or even restaurants, for people to buy food. You're in a restaurant waiting to pick your train to your destination.
Yes.
You can be hungry when a snack. You have to wait until you get into the train and you're sold a snack or a meal relatively expensively, you know. That's what I wanted to inquire from the Managing Director. Is it by design or there's something that is being done around that? Thank you.
Thank you. A banana going for 100 bob, a single banana. Maybe you want to just address that, Mr. Atanas, very briefly.
I think,
thank you very much,
yes. Patrick, for that question. Admittedly, I must apologize that it has taken longer than we should have, we anticipated to roll out the facilities that we should have within our terminuses, termini. That is work in progress now. In the course of February and March, you'll be able to see facilities that will be set up by the private sector. We are looking at what needs to be the basics that we need to have in all those terminals, and that is on course, that is going on, and you will be able to address that question. By March, you'll be able to see certain services introduced in the terminals.
Right, thank you.
Now, on the matter of land acquisition,
yes,
the starting point would be that under the Constitution of Kenya 2010, we introduced a new framework of dealing with land acquisition. Previously, would deal with land acquisition, the Commissioner of Lands would come through and do their thing and determine what the value is. And that was changed under the new Constitution. We introduced the National Land Commission and the Land Act 2012 that then prescribes how land should be acquired, including the fact that it should be compensation should be at market price. So and as was observed here earlier, you deal with different ownership regimes of land when you cross through most of those the corridors.
Yes.
The challenges that we may have faced are not entirely unexpected, because you're basically taking away, unlike a normal arm's length transaction where you negotiate to buy land. This is a compulsory land acquisition for a public purpose. So whether you like it or not, you have to give it away. And the law prescribes how that valuation will be undertaken and how it will be determined. And I must say that when we were engaging, we found that most of the people may not be very familiar with the process of land acquisition. A lot of it would even confuse it with what Patrick was talking about here earlier, whether it's a way leave or it's an acquisition. And the process is also very long. You gazette your intention to acquire, you go through a process of inquiries, you go through a process of ascertaining the amount of corridor, then valuation. And that tends to take a lot of time. And people who are in anticipation, somebody who was farming on a particular parcel, will be holding, they will not farm for a particular season because we're waiting for compensation. That did create a lot of problems. But on the whole, I must say that the National Land Commission did a great job. They were able to clear that quite fast. And the government, through the national, the Railway Development Levy Fund, was also able to compensate people quickly. If we are saying that a project within 4 years, when the project was, or 3.5 years when the project was undertaken, compensations have been done within a period of 2 years. People have their money, they have cleared the corridor. That is, it hasn't happened like that in this country. So there is commitment on the part of government to get it done well, but generally, compensation, compulsory land acquisition is a complex process. It has a lot of governance issues to deal with, many stakeholders, and that really was a challenge. We have issues again where you have land disputes. A lot of that hasn't been paid out, maybe close to 5 billion shillings, because again, ownership of the land cannot be determined. So some of these disputes are in court, others are before the National Land Commission. If I address myself to the issue you raised about the contractor being able to enter into formal arrangements, informal arrangements as you call them, with the landowners, again, what happens is that when you're doing land acquisition, the contract that we've signed with CRBC is what we call is an EPC contract. So they are doing the engineering work, they're doing the procurement of all the facilities, and they're doing construction. So they are also responsible for mapping out what corridor they need and what is the most desirable corridor, which is then vetted by Kenya Railways through a consultant, a design review and supervision consultant. Then our surveyors come through and map out the corridor. We identify the owners, we submit that to the National Land Commission for acquisition purposes. So by the time National Land Commission comes to the ground, we've already had a lot of interaction with the landowners. Okay. You'll find that some of them are saying, if you need it, because I'm not using it, you take it on, move on. I will wait for National Land Commission to come. And what our officers on the ground do then is to sensitize people about the process. It might take time. All right. And then some are saying, take it, pay me, I'll list it to you. Right. So that is a private arrangement that I would not myself get into. Thank you. And when National Land Commission, you'll be paid full value for your land. Thank you. All right. Can we just take Stephen who's on the line, then we continue? I think also we remain with around 7 minutes, but we need to cover also the East African region as well, just very briefly. And Stephen is hanging on the line. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very well. You have a question or a contribution very briefly, sir?
Yeah, I'll be so brief. First
Please.
and foremost, so I thank the MD for Kenya Railways for his eloquence in answering a few questions. However,
Yes.
yeah, I was
Yes, we can hear you. Just don't listen to your TV. Just continue contributing directly, please.
okay.
Yeah, please. Or you cannot turn down on the volume of your television. Your question or contribution?
So basically, what I was asking the MD of Kenya Railways
Yes.
is, do they have any long-term plan of converting the machines to the SGR to electric high-speed planes, electric high-speed trains?
Yes.
So that instead of taking 4 or 5 hours to reach Mombasa, we do 1 hour like in the developed countries.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you. Matthew is hanging on the line. Briefly, Matthew. Good morning, Matthew.
Matthew.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm calling from Garissa.
Yes.
I'm asking how can the Garissa people out there know this and people can be able to benefit from the SGR?
Yes.
And yet all of us are contributing in the payment.
Yes.
And yet how can we ensure that people from Northeastern are also employed in the SGR?
Yes. Good question.
All the other parts of Kenya, which is not located in the realm of SGR.
Yes.
Yes, how can we be able to know that we are also benefiting from this part?
Thank you very much. And of course, Yuzia is going to answer that. And then, of course, we have contribution as well on Twitter. We have Adhere Kavins saying big projects like SGR do disrupt the sector. Jobs can be lost, but think about liberalization of telecom sector despite initial resistance. Safaricom Limited alone has created hundreds of jobs than earlier monopoly scenario. Also, we have Alex asking, what do you want those drivers to feed their families with? Yeah, there is no country with trucks on the road. Of course, this is about the bugbears and fears about losing jobs. Lowering the cost of imports, not necessarily raw materials, but finished products. Amazing economic policy with the SGR. The train to ply Miritini to railways in town, it's a good idea. Last week, I spent 2 hours due to jam from Miritini to Makupa after arriving in terminals from Nairobi with SGR of 2:30 from Nairobi at 7:20 p.m. This is what he's saying. Also, we have Jared saying that the truth, we are still using the colonial way of developing Kenya, opening up the colonial route only. How does SGR assist a resident of Garissa or Nyamira County? And this is alluding also to, of course, Matthew from Garissa, the question that he asked. Maybe briefly we can comment on this, then we're just remaining with a few minutes as we want to talk about, as we're winding up and as we talk about the regional integration as well. Very briefly, sir.
Okay, very quickly. Thank you very much, Stephen, for your compliments. As pertains the long-term plan for maintenance of the equipment that we have in place, there's already a lot of training going on. We have trained over just close to 1,000 employees now working with the operator on SGR. Those are Kenyans who will be with us in the longer term. We're also training others in China. We have 60 students already studying railway engineering and railway courses in China. We'll take another 40 in the course of this year, and we'll continue training at the RTI. Now, as far as upgrading this infrastructure is concerned, for us to have high-speed train, that's something we'd love to have, but that again would depend on our ability as a country to finance that kind of infrastructure.
But we have the capability with this particular standard gauge railway,
this corridor does not have that capability. The technology used is quite different. I know high speed, we're talking about passenger movements, intercity. That's really what you have.
But the government was seeking around 40 billion shillings for the upgrade to electricity. Yeah.
When you talk about...
So was there any plans? Because we saw that they were actually seeking a refinancing of 40 billion shillings so that we may really upgrade this particular standard gauge meter to electricity sort of, standard gauge railway.
Thank you, Debarl. Yeah. The issue of 40 billion,
yes,
that I haven't seen as yet. I saw it in media. For electrification.
Yes.
I know we are doing some work around possibility of electrification of train operations. But we haven't come up with a number, neither have we made such a request. But there's a consideration that is on the table for the fact that across the region, we agreed that we're going to operate an electric traction network.
Yes.
So that is work that's going on, but we have not yet gone to a situation where you talk about funding. But yes, what electric traction would do is to just enhance the speeds or efficiency of the network. But it will not take us to the speeds of 250, 300, what you see across. That is different design. Those trains are designed for passenger movements in countries where really that is a focus, where you move millions and millions of people.
Yes.
I do not think that demand exists in this country for now. Now, for Matthew, I think the overall benefit, as was observed here, is, yes, it is true that the people, the residents of the corridors on which the line passes may benefit directly from the infrastructure that has been constructed. But I think the way the country is organized, even under our new constitution, there is room for diversity, even for people who come from the rest of the regions, even to seek employment or to do business along the corridor. But the bigger picture, when you talk about Northeastern and the other places, when you grow the economy of Nairobi, when Nairobi can produce more, that is also redistributed to the entire nation. So we are all benefiting. The drivers, the focus on the SGR is not to sort out road business. It's actually achieving the desired modal shift. Railway was actually doing 70% of the cargo from Mombasa many years ago, which is now 90%, 95% on road.
Yes.
We are saying we are just finding a desirable modal shift for both modes of transport to coexist, and that is a global trend across the world. The line is opening up certain corridors and not others. You've mentioned Nyamira. Nyamira is one of them. It's covered when you go through, we'll go through Nyamira County as we go to Kisumu. Garissa will be covered by Lapset. We are creating a network of 3,200 kilometers.
Thank you.
Not every other area can be served, but the country is being opened up for railway service. There was one issue that I needed to address, which was asked by Kevit, about the employment and really about the skills that we need and the issues coming around employment across the corridor. One of the challenges that we've had is that the locals are insisting that this is our time. The corridor is passing through here. We need to be given all the jobs that are available. And to some extent, that is a valid issue, that we are going to be impacted a lot more. The job situation, employment situation for the young people in this country is a real problem. It's not an SGR problem. So there are young people who need to get jobs.
Thank you.
But what we've agreed across the various counties is we find a model where we accommodate locals, especially for the unskilled jobs, and also allow people from the rest of the country to come and work.
Thank you.
That is working.
Right. I want just to give this opportunity to Patrick Obath as your closing remarks, and just maybe because we didn't have time to really handle what, if my director may just pick up what was on the East African now. This was 2 weeks ago. Uganda rethinks Kenya SGR over funding gaps, and this is what I want you to clarify as we're winding up. There has been, I think a bit of frustration from Uganda that the refinancing in Kenya will have to delay also the meter gauge in Uganda for at least 3 good years. Is that the case? Very briefly.
No, I think the whole essence of regional integration and the infrastructure for the region was being discussed at a very high level in the region. But then because of the different speeds of the countries, it's separated into the central corridor and the northern corridor. Now, the dynamics of the northern corridor, every country has got its own way of seeking funding, their own way of trying to sort of convince the country. And the difficulty is always aligning the two so that you have, because the viability of the whole project was actually in terms of reducing the cost across the whole region, not just one country. So there's got to be an alignment between all the countries, and that takes a bit of time. And I think we've just seen that in the recent weeks, that alignment has happened after almost 2 years of discussions, almost 3 years of discussions. The alignment has happened, and the line is going to go the way through. You'll have exactly the same discussion between Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda, because there's another one going down that side. And just in closing, I think for me, the real benefit of the SGR will be when you start going north-south. Because currently all the SGRs in the region are being done for export-import. But what about intra-Africa trade?